Maintaining life. How do organisms use the energy we know they require? Your learning objectives for this lesson would be that you can give examples of how living things use the energy they get from food in order to maintain life processes, and that you understand what homeostasis is, and that you can give examples of homeostasis. So far, just remember where we've been. We have learned how producers create food, the process called photosynthesis, and how all life forms release energy from that food. We eat it if we're a consumer, or we make it if we're a producer. And that releasing energy process we call respiration. So now, what do they do with that energy that is released? So we're going to work our way through this diagram, and we're going to start here with the pink bubble where it says movement, and you can fill these in as we go. We're going to discuss each one here. So these are kind of the 6 main things that would be done by a living organism that is requiring the use of energy. So let's start with movement. Movement obviously is a process that's going to take some energy. So some energy that's required by a plant or an animal is expended through movement. Write that down, movement, in that first bubble there. We're going to work our way clockwise. Next is the response to stimuli. So stimuli can mean a lot of different things. It's anything you react to. So in this picture, we see that the stimulus would be a hot pan, and someone who touches it without having an oven mitt or something could burn themselves, and they pull their hand back. That's their response. It doesn't have to be that, though. We see in this other example that we have a plant that the pot has tipped over, and the plant's response to that is to continue to grow in an upright position so it can still get an adequate amount of light. That is called gravitropism, by the way. Next is transport of materials. So write that down, transport. We know sometimes organisms need to move things around. Sometimes that's just across the cell membrane. This is supposed to represent the cell membrane here. Normally things go down the concentration gradient from where they're highly concentrated to where they're less concentrated, but sometimes it goes in the opposite direction, and that requires energy. Or it could be transport of materials around a whole organism, not just inside a single cell. So we talked about how leaves have veins in them, and veins actually are throughout a plant in the stems and the roots, and that's what helps move water and food around. And in a human body or in an animal body, we have a circulatory system which moves food and water and oxygen and other waste products around the body. That requires energy. Next is growth, right? Both plants and animals do growth. All living things do, unless you're a single-celled organism. And we actually have a whole unit talking about how things grow and reproduce in several weeks. Related to that a little bit is repair. If there's damage to an organism, then it can repair itself. That's one of the features of a living thing, but that requires energy. Next is elimination of waste. So we'll talk a little bit more about this, but we have these 3 things pictured here because these are your primary organs that help you eliminate waste. So we have the kidney, we have your lungs, and then we have your skin, which eliminates waste via sweat. And then at the bottom of the graphic is homeostasis, and we're going to talk about that more in detail. But I will just point out on the picture here that what it's representing really is balance in the organism. So that's where we're going to spend the rest of our lesson. So all those things we just talked about in that graphic, all the chemical reactions going on in a living system or body that help keep an organism alive, we call that metabolism. So sometimes you might hear people say that they have a high metabolism, right? What they're really referring to is kind of how fast they use energy. If we look at this next graphic here, we can kind of see that we're comparing what goes into the body with what comes out of the body. So we know we have to take oxygen in, right? We've been learning that. We know that we have to take in water, food, and some chemical energy comes into us. And we then expend that energy, and we create carbon dioxide that leaves through our lungs. Some water comes out through our breath and through our sweat. Urine, we'll talk more about that in a minute. Feces is solid waste, and then heat is given off. So it's really, metabolism is really that process of kind of comparing what goes into your body, how you're using the energy to do your life processes, and then what's leaving your body.
Moby, did you eat all my cereal? That's really great. Dear Tim and Moby, why do I need to eat breakfast? From Mail. All living organisms need energy for their cells to grow and function. Eating food is how animals, including humans, get that energy. Once food has been eaten, it's processed through a series of chemical reactions that we call metabolism. Metabolic reactions fall into one of two categories, catabolic and anabolic. Catabolic reactions break down complex molecules from your food into simpler molecules, releasing energy in the process. Anabolic reactions use that energy to build other complex molecules from the simple molecules. Yeah, I guess you could say that catabolism powers anabolism. Cellular respiration, the process in which glucose is broken down, is an example of a catabolic reaction. Glucose is a kind of sugar we get from food. It's the main source of fuel for the body's cells. Inside the part of a cell known as the mitochondrion, glucose is split into simpler molecules like carbon dioxide and water. Energy is released in the process. Right, the energy that comes from that reaction is used to keep cells healthy and grow new ones. That's when anabolism comes in. Anabolic reactions are ones that build up molecules that help our cells multiply and stay in good working condition. Things like bone and muscle growth all come from anabolic reactions. Well, plants have metabolisms too, but they don't need to eat food for energy. Instead, they make their own food through a process called photosynthesis. Plants use their roots to drink up water from the soil, while their leaves absorb carbon dioxide from the air. The leaves also absorb sunlight, storing its energies in special structures called chloroplasts. These contain a green pigment called chlorophyll, which traps photons of sunlight. When energy from those photons is combined with carbon dioxide and water, it triggers a chemical reaction. The products of this anabolic reaction are oxygen and glucose. Good point. Besides being a main source of nutrition for the plants, the glucose can also provide some much-needed energy to any animal that decides to make a meal out of the plant. Speaking of meals, I need some breakfast. Okay, I'm not eating that. No way, there's glue in there. Ah, get away!
So we know organisms must maintain what we call homeostasis, which is the ability of a living organism to regulate its internal environment so as to maintain a stable, constant condition. So your body's doing this all the time and in many, many different ways. We're going to talk about a bunch of different examples of this. So first example would be temperature. Not every single animal does this, but humans do. We are warm-blooded creatures, and we maintain a body temperature of about 37 degrees Celsius. That's equivalent to 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. And that body temperature needs to be maintained even when the temperature outside is much warmer than that or much cooler than that. We also call this thermoregulation, which is a long word, but if you take it apart, it should make sense. Thermo means heat. Regulation means to regulate or to monitor. So your body is doing this constantly. Some animals do not regulate body temperature, or they don't do it internally. For instance, this lizard is a reptile, and it is considered an ectotherm. Ecto means outside. Therm also refers to heat. So basically, they control their body temperature just by their behavior, but they do not control it internally. They choose to sun themselves on the rock, like you see the lizard doing. If they need to warm up, or if they need to cool down, they will go into hiding or go underground or into a cave where their bodies can cool off. Still an example of homeostasis, just not internally controlled the way it is in humans.
Animals, like people, must keep their body temperature within a certain range to survive. In the harshest environments, some have developed remarkable ways to cope with heat and do just that. Elephants live in hot places and evolved a number of mechanisms for keeping cool. One way is through its skin, which is several sizes too big for its body. Heat energy is lost through the skin, so the more skin, the better. The wrinkles that cover an elephant give it a greater area from which excess heat can escape. While these elephants play, they cool down in the muddy water. Mud collects in their folds and holds moisture near the skin when they leave the pool. This moisture gradually evaporates and cools the elephant over time, much like evaporating sweat cools us. But perhaps the most impressive system for beating the heat can be found in the elephant's ears. As this infrared camera shows in red, these ears radiate a lot of heat. When it's hot, blood vessels in the ears open and allow blood to cool as it flows within the paper-thin skin. Elephants flap their ears as a way of further cooling this blood. All the blood in an elephant, about 100 gallons, can be pumped through its ears in 20 minutes. The cooled blood travels through the rest of its system, cooling both its body and brain. At the coldest place on Earth, the few creatures that are able to survive face the opposite problem. They need to conserve heat energy. In Antarctica, temperatures rarely climb above freezing. But somehow, emperor penguins manage to keep warm. For one thing, they stick together. In brutal winds, they huddle in large groups and take turns standing in the middle. The insulation of others helps them reduce heat loss by almost half. A penguin's feathers are densely packed, overlapping, and waterproof. And it controls these feathers individually. When the temperature drops, it lifts its feathers upright to trap a layer of insulating air next to its body. Penguins have no choice but to stand on the ice on their bare feet. But fortunately, their feet are small and lined with fat. By rocking back on their heels, they keep their contact with the ice to a minimum. As their blood circulates, their body absorbs some of the heat before it reaches their feet. In this case, heat energy travels from the warmer bodies of penguins to the colder environment around them. These penguins need every defense they can get to survive.
Another example of homeostasis would be the fluid balance in your body. That would mean how much water is in your body. We need to maintain that. You may have heard the words dehydrated, which is when your body doesn't have enough water. And you can sort of monitor that by how much you are using the bathroom, how much you're sweating, and how much water you're putting into your body in the first place.
Water is essential for life. We take it in mainly by drinking and eating. But as well as gaining it, the body also loses it. You breathe out water vapor. And water vapor evaporates from your skin. It's most noticeable when you sweat. More obviously, you lose water through urine and feces. But despite these daily gains and losses, the body works hard to keep its internal body fluids at a constant concentration. The kidneys play an important role, producing more or less urine depending on how much water you've gained or lost. As well as sweating profusely for the past couple of hours, Lisa has had nothing to drink since yesterday. By now, she'll be extremely dehydrated. One obvious sign is that she's producing very little urine, and it's dark in colour. On the other hand, Joanne has taken in lots of liquid over the past few hours. Her urine is plentiful and very pale. Her body is losing water, which means that she must be fully hydrated. The kidneys regulate the amount of urine produced. It's their job to keep body fluids, like your blood, at a constant volume and concentration. Blood flows in through the renal artery and out through the renal vein. Inside the kidney are millions of microscopic devices called nephrons. Blood entering each nephron is filtered. Most of its fluid content, represented here as yellow, passes into the nephron tube. As it trickles down, exactly the right amount of water is taken back to give the blood its correct volume. The remaining waste solution passes out as urine. So what will happen to Lisa and Joanne's urine levels if they both drink a litre of water? They continue to give samples every half hour. Lisa's urine is gradually getting paler, but she's still producing less than Joanne. In just 2 hours, Joanne has lost nearly all the water she took in. Her kidneys are getting rid of any excess fluid. When she drank a large quantity of water, her body fluid increased. This excess fluid appears in the blood. When it reaches the kidney, very little is reabsorbed into the bloodstream. Most of the water passes out as urine, bringing the blood volume back to normal. So if you're dehydrated, what's happening inside your kidneys?
More homeostasis examples. One would be your blood composition, meaning what's being carried around in your blood. Your body needs to maintain just exactly the right amount of sugar, of fat, of acidity, which we call pH. Your blood pressure, all of that needs to be maintained at an even level. If we look at your sugar content in your blood, and if it's too high or too low, those are both forms of diabetes, which you may know someone who has diabetes. You'll hear more on that in a minute. Also not allowing the accumulation of wastes. Yes, carbon dioxide, but there's another waste in your blood called urea, which is a component of urine, and you can't let that build up in your body either. That can be toxic. And then there is the composition of gases in your blood, making sure you have the right amount of oxygen and carbon dioxide levels. That all needs to be maintained balanced. So if we think about the whole organism, the human body as a whole, there's some major organs that help us regulate homeostasis in your body. The brain, of course, which really regulates and coordinates all the functioning of the other organs. Your kidneys, we talked about being important for cleaning out your blood. Your liver, it also helps clean out blood, filters the toxins out of your blood. And your excretory organs, which would include your lungs, your skin, your digestive system, and your endocrine system, which is really your hormones. All of those things help regulate, provide feedback, and manage your body so that you can maintain homeostasis and your body can function the way it's supposed to. They all help keep you alive.
Dear Tim and Moby, what is homeostasis? From Oded. That's a great question, Oded. We all know that the conditions in the outside world change all the time. But things are different inside your body. The conditions in there don't really change at all. In most circumstances, our body temperature stays within a relatively narrow range. That's because humans are warm-blooded animals, just like cats and dogs and camels. Ew. Cold-blooded animals, like lizards and fish, depend on their environment to regulate their body temperature. Anyway, the temperature and the chemical balance inside your body have to stay the same for you to function. To maintain this sameness, which is called homeostasis, your body regulates itself in a bunch of ways. Thermoregulation is the way your body keeps its temperature steady at around 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, no matter how hot or cold it is outside. Here's how it works. The hypothalamus is a part of your brain that acts as a sort of a thermostat. When your body temperature starts to rise or fall, a special team of nerves and hormones, called a feedback system, sends a warning to the hypothalamus. Moby made this thing to show how feedback works. When the water level gets too high, he opens the valve at the bottom to let some out. If there's too little water, he adds more to keep the water at just the right level. The feedback systems in your body behave in much the same way. Most feedback is negative, meaning that the change is bad news and needs to be countered. In thermoregulation, it's negative feedback that tells the hypothalamus when you're overheated and you need to sweat. Or that you're really cold and you may need to shiver in order to generate heat. Feedback can be positive too, meaning that the change in your body is a good thing and should even be increased for a while. When a pregnant woman goes into labor, it's positive feedback controlling the contractions that push the baby out. Another part of the hypothalamus's job is to make you run a fever when you're sick. At those times, the thermostat resets itself to a higher temperature to give your body more heat energy to fight infection. But homeostasis isn't just about regulating body temperature. For example, your excretory organs get rid of chemical waste that's poisonous to your body. A part of your brain called the respiratory center makes sure that you have the right oxygen and carbon dioxide mix in your blood at all times. And your immune system defends you from invading viruses, bacteria, and allergens that don't belong in your body. Homeostasis ensures that the environment inside your body remains stable, no matter how crazy the outside world gets. No, I'm not going to feel your forehead. Because you don't have a fever. Well, you're not warm-blooded. You don't have blood. Oh, you forgot to turn that water thing off. You just exist to get me in trouble, don't you? Dear Tim and Moby, what is diabetes? Do you get it from eating too much candy? From Raichu. Diabetes is a disease that doctors have known about for thousands of years. It was understood how diabetes affects the human body a long time ago, but it wasn't until the 20th century that real treatments were developed. You don't get diabetes from eating too many sweets, but diabetes is related to sugar. Everybody has a sugar called glucose in their blood. We get this glucose from the food we eat, and our bodies use it as fuel. A hormone called insulin, produced in your pancreas, controls how much of this glucose your body's cells can absorb. This way, you have enough glucose to keep you going. This natural balance breaks down in folks with diabetes. Depending on the type of diabetes, either not enough insulin is produced, or the body's cells can't use the insulin that is produced. Either way, diabetes causes trouble in regulating blood sugar levels. The full name of the disease is diabetes mellitus. Mellitus is the Latin word for sweetened with honey, and this name describes a major symptom of diabetes. Diabetics often have sugar in their urine because their bodies are not absorbing it. Believe it or not, this is how doctors used to have to test for diabetes. Well, now there are all sorts of ways to test for excess sugar in the blood, like blood glucose meters. Lots of glucose in your blood means less sugar for your body's cells. High blood glucose can make you feel tired, dizzy, or even sick. If you have diabetes, the trick is to restore balance to your body. Your doctor will prescribe a system of healthy eating and exercise that's right for you. Well, as I said before, there are a number of different kinds of diabetes, but the disease generally comes in two forms, type 1 and type 2. Type 2 diabetes is the most common, and it usually happens in adults. Many people can control type 2 diabetes by changing their diet. If that doesn't work, they can usually take a pill or liquid medicine that helps control it. Type 1 diabetes is much rarer and generally much more serious. This is the kind of diabetes that's most common in children, which is why it's sometimes called juvenile diabetes. Unlike type 2 diabetes, you can't control this form of the disease with diet alone. People with type 1 diabetes have to take doses of insulin to make up for the insulin that the pancreas isn't producing. Yeah, I guess it's a lot like juggling. No, wait, I can't juggle. Although, I guess I could learn.
Let's review the functions of living things again. This is really where we started some of the unit on and even started talking about last unit. You may recall doing this as a warm-up earlier in the unit, and I would like you to turn back to that page in your comp book and take a look at what you had marked. Remember that you were supposed to mark a P if you felt that only plants did this, an A if you felt only animals did it, and a B if you thought both plants and animals do it. So let's just revisit your thinking. Would you agree with what you initially marked? Maybe here we are at the end of the unit and you've realized that maybe your answers would be a little bit different. And if you're wondering what the correct answer was, all of them are B except for this one. Photosynthesis is only done by plants or things that are considered producers. So that one would be P, but all the rest are B, meaning both plants and animals do those activities.